next few minutes. We will try to start promptly at noon, but I just wanted to let you all know, if you didn't see it when you were coming in, there is a sign-up sheet. We have 2 tables at 2 entrances out in like the main area. And we also have these little slips. If you would like to make public comment at the end, make sure to fill one of these out and get them to me. That's all. We'll start here in a minute. Thanks.
Like a side button, right? The laser one or two, you know, just making emphasis on point. What, the middle school teacher, right? Professor. There's one right there. All right. We are going to go ahead and get started. As I said, if you are just getting here, there's sign-up sheets at our tables in the front, so make sure to fill that out. We also have slips of paper if you would like to make public comment. I will be gathering those. So if anyone has them, I will take them. If you need to fill one out, we will have some. We ask that you please be respectful to our presenters and audience members and withhold all remarks until the public comment portion of our meeting. We do thank you all for being here today. We thank those on our live stream watching today. And of course, thank you to our presenters. Now I would like to introduce Secretary of State Diego Morales, who will kick our meeting off with some opening remarks. Secretary Morales.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Welcome to the second election study public meeting. I want to start by thanking each of you for being here today. thank you for coming to this important meeting. As Indiana Secretary of State, it is both my duty and my privilege to ensure that our elections are free, fair, safe, and secure. We are here today because of House Enroll Act 1633. This legislation requires my office to study two important issues. First, the consideration of holding municipal elections during presidential or midterm election years. Second, whether or not to use vote centers across Indiana. To carry out this study, the law requires us to hold 3 public meetings. And during these meetings, we want to hear from Hoosiers. We want to include the public opinion we receive in our final report for the Legislative Council. Whether you are for or against moving when we hold municipal elections, or whether you are in support or in opposition to use vote centers in Indiana or in your county, we want to know that. So we're so happy that you're here. Since taking office, I have traveled to all 92 counties, going to speak about election issues. Everywhere I go, I bring up elections and possible changes to the election process. Because elections impacts us all, and Hoosiers know best how we should run Indiana elections. Today's meeting is the second of these meetings that we're hosting all across our state. We are hosting these sessions to make sure voices from across Indiana are heard. And I know many are watching us online as well as we speak. We want to hear your opinions, but before that, I want you to know that my office will be presenting, along with the Voting System Technical Oversight Program from Ball State University. Our office has collected election data from election administrators across our state. And of course, we're working very, very closely with the Election Assistance Commission as well. My office will be presenting on the timing of municipal elections, and the Voting System Technical Oversight Program will be presenting in the use of vote centers in Indiana. The information that we will be presented today, along with information we receive from public comments, will come together in a report we must submit by the Legislative Council by November. Before I close my remarks, I would like to thank many of you who came to our great Indiana State Fair. Many of you stopped by our great Indiana State Fair. My office was once again the proud sponsor of the $2 Tuesdays, and we had booths set up every day at our great state fair. We were there getting eligible Hoosiers registered to vote, just like what we're doing at every single local county fair across the 92 counties. Since taking office, we have been hard at work making sure Indiana continues to lead the way when it comes to elections. And that is done by working together as a team. Your input is an important part of this process. Thank you again for being here today. Your dedication to our great Hoosier state is much appreciated. Now I will turn it over to my team so we can begin the presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Secretary Morales. So Kegan Prentice and Dustin Renner from the Secretary of State's office will begin our presentations today. They will be presenting their findings related to municipal elections and the cost of elections. Once they are done, Dr. Chad Kinsella and Matt Housley from the Voting System Technical Oversight Program will present their findings related to the use of vote centers in Indiana.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Apologize for my voice. We got hit with some back to school germs in our household this week. So as mentioned, I'm going to start us off with the municipal election portion of the study. So some background information on this. We collected this information through a survey of county clerks and information pulled from CEB forms and the statewide voter registration system. So looking at municipal elections first. So Indiana Code 3-5-3-7 and 3-5-3-8 lay out the reimbursement process for counties who run municipal elections. So in 2023, the municipal primary election cost approximately $8.8 million. And this was held with 66 counties out of our 92. And then the 2023 municipal general election cost $9.4 million, and that was held in 86 counties. So the total cost of those elections was $18 million. Moving on to midterm elections. This is for the 2022 midterm election. The 2022 primary cost $8.9 million, and the 2022 general cost nearly $10 million for a total cost of $18.8 million. Then finally, we'll look at presidential elections. So the 2024 primary cost $13.3 million. The 2024 general cost $16.2 million, for the total cost of the presidential cycle being $29.6 million. So as you can see, municipal elections cost nearly the same amount to conduct as midterm elections. And then finally, going to look at some voter turnout for the 2022, 2023, and 2024 elections. The municipal general election in 2023 had about a 20.6% turnout. The midterm general had a nearly 40% turnout. And then the presidential general had a 61.5% turnout for a total of nearly 3 million voters. The 2022 midterm general election cost an additional 5.67% to run compared to the 2023 municipal general election, and saw a 92.3% increase in voter turnout. The 2024 presidential election cost an additional 72.84% to run compared to the 2023 municipal general election, and saw a nearly 200% increase in voter turnout. So that's all I have, and I'm going to turn it over to Kagan for some more analysis.
I apologize for that. So after taking the election cost data and the voter turnout data, we decided to look at cost per vote comparisons between municipal primaries, midterm primary, presidential primary, and then municipal general, midterm general, and presidential general elections. Up on the screen currently is the cost per vote comparison between those separate elections. The municipal primary has a cost per vote, so that is taking the total cost of the election, which was we took the so the 8,757,960 and 52 cents, and that is divided between the divided by the municipal primary turnout, which we didn't compare the municipal primary turnout with the primary turnouts of the other years, just because there are so few. There are a lot of counties that don't hold municipal primary elections, so trying to compare turnout between primaries in different years is sometimes difficult. But those numbers are divided to get the average cost per vote for a municipal primary was $27.81. The cost per vote in a midterm primary was $13.42. And cost per vote for the presidential primary was $16.52. And again, those years are saying municipal was 2023, the midterm was the 2022 election, and the presidential was the 2024 election. So putting that in perspective, the cost per vote in a municipal primary is 107% greater than a midterm primary election cost per vote, and 71% greater than presidential primary cost per vote. So the percentage difference is obviously greater between general elections. Moving on to the general elections, where the percentage increase is greater, the municipal general election has an average cost of $15.52 per vote. The midterm general election has a cost of $5.26 per vote, and the presidential general election has a cost of $5.47 per vote. So that cost per vote, the difference between those two are greater. The cost per vote in a municipal primary is 195% greater than midterm election cost per vote and 183% greater than a presidential election cost per vote. So moving from municipal to the general elections, the primary to the general elections, that difference between the cost per vote gets greater in terms of percentage wise. And then we decided to highlight some counties and between each election. So we wanted to look at the range that you see between each election. So in the 2023 municipal primary, counties range from the lowest of $3.14 per vote to the highest, a county having $473.29 per vote, with a county average of $45.24. Moving on to the municipal general, that range was $1.58 per vote, to the highest of $557.60 per vote, with the county average being $33.22. Midterm primaries, counties ranged from the lowest of $2.93 per vote to the highest with $56.78 per vote, with a county average of $15.37. And as you move these elections down, the range gets smaller and smaller as the cost gets smaller and smaller as well. The midterm general counties range from $1.81 to the highest being $48.96, with a county average of $6.51. Presidential primary, the range was $2.77 to $44.27, with an average of $14.27. And the presidential general, obviously the lowest amount in the lowest range of 67 cents per vote, to the highest being $24.33, with a county average of $5.39 per vote, or $5.39. So after we looked at the cost and the cost data, we moved on to turnout data and potential increases in voter turnout by moving municipal elections. So what we did to do that, we looked at the number of voters who voted in the 2023 municipal general election, but didn't vote in the 22 general election. In the inverse, we looked at the voters that voted in the 2023 municipal general, but didn't vote in the 2024 presidential general election. So we found that in the 2022 general election, in the 2023 municipal election, there were 78,693 voters that voted that did not vote in 2022 general election. So that would have equated to a 1.65% increase if you assume those voters that voted in the municipal general election solely turned out to vote in those municipal elections and decided not to vote for congressional elections in midterm years or turn out for the presidential year. Move the 2024 general, the number was a lot lower. Obviously, you see a lot greater turnout during presidential election years. So only 23,395 voters that voted in 23 did not vote in 24. So you had a much smaller potential increase of 0.5%, just under 0.5%. What we didn't account for, because the data is hard to collect between all 92 counties, is increase in campaign spending from local candidates that you would see by moving municipal elections to either midterm or presidential year. I will attempt to collect that in our final report from a few counties, but it's just hard to do on a statewide basis. Moving on, we looked at ballot drop-off rates as well. When this bill was being discussed in committee, a lot of discussion was had on potential ballot drop-off rates once you get further down on the ballot for city council, mayor's races during like a presidential year when you have president, governor, attorney general, Congress, state rep, state senate. So the ballot gets long. So we looked at some previous studies in doing this, and previous studies that have found that ballot fatigue might lead voters to skip lower profile races on a long ballot, but the increase you get by moving those elections to on cycle outweighs any effect of potential ballot drop off. So having that main election will draw more voters. It increases the likelihood that those voters will vote for every race, even if some might just skip the mayor, city council elections. So we looked at a few elections here in Indiana in 2023. We looked at the ballot drop-off rates of the Indianapolis mayor to the city council, Fort Wayne mayor to the city council, and the Carmel mayor to the city council. So these elections usually only have two races on the ballot, mayor and city council. So in Indianapolis, there was still an 8.8% ballot drop-off. In Fort Wayne, there is an 8.73% ballot drop-off. And in Carmel, there is a 4% ballot drop-off. And then we looked at specific races in 24 and 22 to compare. So in 24, we picked president to county surveyor, and we did, I did account for the counties that didn't have county surveyor races. So I forget how many counties this included, but the drop-off was 22.74% from president to county surveyor. And in 2022, it was much easier because every township trustee is elected in midterm elections. So a ballot drop-off rate from Senate to township trustee was 19.56%. So yes, you do have the bigger ballot drop-off rates in those midterm presidential election years. But obviously you see, going back to the voter turnout increases you see between those separate elections. You have over 1 million, 2 million people, more people voting. So having that extra 10% ballot drop-off rate, you have more people voting these elections. But we did want to see why there was a bigger ballot drop-off rate. And one contributing factor that we did find was a discrepancy between contested elections with these various races. So in 2024, we looked at the county surveyor races, but 87% of those county surveyor races were not contested. And in 2022, we looked at the township trustee races, but 85% of those township trustee races were not contested. Compare that to the council races and the ballot drop-off rates. Fort Wayne, 50% of their council was went uncontested. 40% of the Indianapolis council was uncontested, and only 17% for the Carmel council went uncontested. So if you factor in the contested races, that difference between ballot drop-offs and municipal elections does decrease. One thing we also wanted to highlight here, outside of local costs for these elections, there are state costs that you would see for moving municipal elections. The BMV has to be open the Monday prior to each election day, and for election day for extended hours when there is an election. We have a service called Democracy Live to provide accessibility to sight disabled voters. That's $50,000 each election. There's a cost for the statewide voter registration system vendor to keep their help desk call center open for extra hours on election day, and cost for Homeland Security law enforcement support on election day. So we did also want to compare this to, this isn't just an Indiana specific issue. Low turnout is a problem nationwide in state-owned elections. So we looked at some various other studies too, specifically a study of 340 elections from 1996 to 2011, saw an average turnout of about 25.8%. And another study examined 332 mayor elections over 25 years and found a similar average of 27%. So this low turnout in municipal elections isn't just a problem in Indiana. This is a nationwide problem. And one final thing we looked at, and this is based on other studies as well, the representation of the electorate in these municipal elections. Local elections with few races on the ballot lead to selective participation and produces a voter pool that is disproportionately comprised of those who care more about the issues at stake in those local elections, potentially allowing interest groups to have more influence over those elections. One study that we did find is with school board elections and off-cycle races. Obviously, that's not an issue here in Indiana because our school board elections are in those even-numbered years. But that specific study found that teachers are 7 times more likely to vote in school district elections than a normal member of the public. Replace that school teacher with a local government employee, and you're going to find a similar result. And studies also show that voters in local elections are demographically unrepresentative of the electorate overall as well. That is all the information I have. I will turn it over to VStop to go over their vote center study.
Thanks, Hagan. Let's see. So again, myself and Matt Housley are presenting on vote centers. And so the goal of the study, we're trying to analyze and estimate the cost savings and effects of voter turnout by requiring all counties to use vote centers. So we've looked at a number of different things and pulled from a number of different sources in order to compile all of the information. So Matt looked at, we were able to pull from the EVES data, which is available from the Election Assistance Commission, election staffing, equipment usage, compiled through the EVES data, number of voting locations, again, EVES data, estimated election costs, again, from state data, voter turnout, again, via state data from 2010 through 2024, and voter experience, again, so we can't go back and give surveys to people, but MIT does a survey almost every midterm and presidential election. They didn't want to do one in 2018. They didn't have the funds, but anyway, and they kind of ask about voter experience. And so we were able to pull generally about 300 to 200 of the sample of people in Indiana to look at their voter experience. And they do have some questions that would apply to vote centers to see if there's a difference between the two. So we did some different things. And again, so some of the statistical methods we did is vote center and turnout. So it's a difference on difference. There are some problems with that. I do need to still add. I haven't had a chance to do that since we met last in Muncie, but adding some different covariates. The idea is like there are some other things that also explain election outside of just vote centers. And right now it's just looking at the difference between vote center and non-vote center counties. Voter experience, again, it's just looking at those samples. And then the raw data comparison is just the staffing, the equipment used, voting locations, and election costs. So just, again, Matt will present all of that. And so this is a very busy screen, but ultimately, again, because we use a whole lot of different data, the findings are only as good as the data. And I think one of the other things that we wanted to put in here is that, so we use 2010 to 2024. And again, kind of looking at one of the key comparisons is looking at midterms and then presidential election, kind of comparing apples to oranges. We did throw out 2020 because 2020, for all of us who lived through it, was definitely a pineapple in terms of trying to explain that. So a lot of things were different that year. Some of us like to forget, but anyway, than any other year that we've ever had for elections. But ultimately, these are all the kind of the data sources and just kind of our way of saying that the findings are only as good as the data itself. So we did collect. There's been some studies on vote centers, and it's kind of interesting. And so in the three areas that we looked at, so the literature on turnout is all over the place. Now, again, primarily academics that have done research on vote centers, they've looked a lot at Colorado and Texas. Colorado was the first state, then followed very shortly after by Indiana to adopt vote centers. Colorado's pretty much gone to all mail at this point, and in Texas, somewhere a little less than half of their counties. And again, now Texas has 254 counties, so they have the most in the country. Everything is bigger in Texas, including the number of counties. But so there's some differences there. And again, Colorado and Texas, and then there's a couple for even one or two from California. Those populations and those people are obviously different from Indiana. So again, take that for what it's worth. And so what they found is when they looked at some different vote centers, Colorado and Texas, is that it might have helped turn out a little bit in that it helped some infrequent voters, is what they called them, come to vote. And then there were a couple of instances, again, in Colorado and Texas, particularly in Texas. So Texas, they don't have municipal elections like we do. They call them constitutional elections in their odd years, 2017, 2019, 2021, so on and so forth. And they found that turnout was helped a little bit by the presence of vote centers. But again, very marginal findings. So the type of election very much matters. And again, it would seem, again, from most of the research that's been done, that vote centers seem to help turnout in your lowest turnout elections, if they help at all. And then there's been other studies in Indiana that was done by the Bowen Center and a couple other states that basically found, no difference in the turnouts between having a vote center and a non-vote center county. voter experience. So there's been a look at, do voters like vote centers more? And again, very much like turnout, the literature is all over the place on this as well. So again, there's been some studies that have found, including here in Indiana, after vote centers were first introduced, that people liked vote centers. Some other things. So there was a couple of studies done in Colorado at about the same time, and there was a study done in Larimer County, which I don't know where that is. I can't remember it. And then in Denver, and they found that people in Larimer County loved their vote centers, and the people in Denver didn't. And again, so a lot of it has to do with how you roll out your vote centers. And again, I'll give an anecdotal. Kenton County, Kentucky, where I grew up, my parents are still there. And the 2022 was the first time that they had introduced vote centers, and my dad went. They had some connectivity issues, which meant that the e-poll books didn't work as the way they were supposed to. I know the church where they went is a monster church, but anyway, and so they had problems, and my dad had to wait an hour. And he likes to tell me all of his problems that he encounters with voting, because somehow I'm supposed to fix all of these. Anyway, so he had to wait an hour, and he would tell me, I've been voting since 1968, and I've never had to wait in line. I had to wait an hour, and I'm never voting again. He did vote in 2024, and I didn't hear any complaints. So I'm going to assume that vote center, the problem there in Kenton County was fixed. So a lot of it's the rollout. And again, even even the best preparation, and again, this goes for anything in life, is doesn't necessitate that things are going to go right. So that people can have a different experience. And that's kind of a lot what's been found. And then, as a matter of fact, to bolster this, there was a study done in Harris County, which is Houston, Texas, when they first introduced vote centers. And this would have been 2016 to 2019. And they actually found that people didn't like vote centers. They liked them less. So again, the data on this is kind of all over the place, and a lot of it's kind of the rollout when it first happens. And then finally, literature on election costs. So there is a lot of there's been a lot of pushback against the idea of that you have some people would call it maybe like antiquated, that we still have precincts in it, and the amount of time and effort and cost that are put into all of these different precincts that across the country. And so what's found is overall and across the board on this is that by and large, vote centers do save money. So there was a study, pretty intensive study done in Colorado to see if vote centers save money. And I think it was $2.83 per voter across the state was saved by introducing vote centers. The Indiana Policy Institute did a study way back in 2010. That also said, if we did this, it would save money. I'll let Matt, I won't steal his thunder from this. And then there was even a study in a town I've never been to. I didn't even know it existed until I found this paper, but there was a guy at the University of Tennessee, Knox County, Tennessee allowed for vote centers. They put one in Farragut, Tennessee. It's a little suburb outside of Knoxville. And according to his findings, that they saved a not insignificant amount of money, and I think doing a municipal election. So overall, again, this may be one of the few areas that are consistent in that there is savings to be had when you introduce vote centers. And just a real quick over the last 12 years, and I think this is very helpful to kind of see, regardless of how vote centers have gone, the vote centers have increased nationally and then across across Indiana. So Matt put this, I wish I could claim this. I had one just with one line, but he put in the two, and I think it's very helpful to see. So if you look at the black graph, that is the number of counties that are using precinct-based voting. The red line is the number of counties that are using vote centers. And you can see at around 2020, you have a point where the number of vote center counties overtook the number of precinct-based counties, and they've increased to a point. Again, they're now in the majority. And again, I think we were at a discussion recently with Delaware County. Delaware County is even thinking about doing it, and a couple of other counties. So they seem to be on the ascendancy, not only nationally, but here in Indiana as well. And with that, I'm going to let Matt take over and talk about the hard part of all of this.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just a heads up, my slides are busy. but that is because when this presentation gets sent to the legislature, I wanted them to be able to have all the information they needed in it. And so I will walk you through a lot of what you're going to see today and talk you through it. So hopefully it is not too overwhelming for you. So the first thing we wanted to take a look at was taking a look at counties that utilized precinct-based voting in 2016, switched during that time frame after the election, and then used vote center voting in 2024. And we wanted to see if there was a difference in their staffing from the 2016 election to the 2024 election. So this analysis focuses again on the 2016 and 2024 presidential elections. This analysis utilized 58 counties. It was focusing on 36 counties that used precinct-based voting in 2016 and then used vote center voting in 2024. And then I also had a group of control counties. So those are counties that maintained precinct voting from 2016 to 2024. So that would allow us to control for any differences we notice and make sure that we adjust our findings to meet those controls. So what did we find? We had found, so again, all of this information is using aggregated averages. Okay, so we're taking all of the counties that were eligible, taking their available data and bringing it together into averages. Again, you're going to see a lot of slides with a lot of information on it. It's going to be hard to read. That's okay. I'm going to talk you through it. And so what we had found is that counties that switched from precinct to vote center from 2016 to 2024, on average needed 63 fewer poll workers in their elections, which equates to about 32% fewer staff that was needed. So again, 32% fewer that was needed for those counties that began precinct and switched to vote center models. Our precinct-based counties, they also had an efficient election difference as well. So they used less poll workers as well. So we found that the precinct-based counties used on average about 44 fewer poll workers. So again, this shows that our elections were more efficient in 2024 than 2016. So when you take that and you subtract those averages, you can see there that on average, our vote center counties needed approximately 19% fewer poll workers than our precinct-based counties. We also know that here in Indiana, counties are not the same, right? We have counties that have 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 registered voters, all the way up to Marion County, which is in the hundreds of thousands of voters. So we wanted to actually take this and break it down to see if there was any differences when you break the counties down by size. So what we did is we used an 8-year average voter turnout. So I took voter turnout data from 2016, 18, 22, and 24, and I combined them to create an average turnout. And then I grouped those counties based on turnout size. So this is what you can see here. So just for reference, our small counties had an average turnout of 2,000 to 14,999 voters. Our medium-sized counties that we had a 15,000 to 49,999 voters. Our large counties had 50,000 to 999,000 voters, and our extra-large counties had a turnout of 100,000 voters or more. Okay, I will admit that we don't have a lot of super large counties, so the analysis gets a little bit more muddy with our extra large counties because we don't have as many data points to go off of. But our small and medium counties, as you can see, we have tons of counties that meet those requirements, and so the data can much more confidently be applied. So what we found, this is for our small counties. So in small counties, we found that the counties that switched used on average 37% fewer poll workers. So even a greater than the aggregate average from prior when you combined all the counties together. So they used 37% fewer poll workers. Again, our small precinct-based counties also used fewer poll workers. So they used approximately 12% fewer poll workers. And of course, so then when you subtract those and you moderate for that control, we found that small counties on average used 25% fewer poll workers when they switched from precinct-based model to vote center models from 2016 to 2024. Taking a look at our medium-sized counties, the effects were a little bit smaller. So you can see here that they used 28% fewer poll workers for our counties that had switched, and for the counties that had maintained precincts, they also use fewer poll workers, 26% fewer poll workers. So we found that for our medium-sized counties, it was about a 2% difference in poll workers. Our large counties. So again, this is where there has to be a little bit of a caveat here in our large counties. But what we had found, as you can see, there's not many. So I listed them here, Hendricks, Porter, and St. Joseph, were counties that ended up switching from precinct to vote centers. They used on average 34% fewer poll workers. So again, we're sitting right around this nice about 30% average mark that counties that switched from 2016 to 2024 used about a third fewer poll workers, regardless of the size. And as you can see here, we have one county that used precinct-based that fit in this category, which was Monroe County, and they had 27% more poll workers. And that was because they added additional locations from 2016 to 2024. So that number there makes sense. And then in our extra large counties, there was not many of those, as you can see. So our switch county was Marion. They switched in 2018. They actually used 348 more poll workers. I'm not going to claim to know that one and to know why they used more poll workers. I have a feeling it was because they either increased locations or increased the staffing at those locations to lower the wait time, but I'm not going to claim that I know that 100%. And then our precinct-based counties, they run very efficient elections. These three counties arguably run probably the most efficient elections in terms of cost and in terms of actual precinct-based elections in our state. So Allen, Hamilton, and Lake, they use 15% fewer poll workers. We wanted to do the exact same analysis and look at the midterm elections. So again, utilizing the exact same parameters that we did for the general election. This one allowed us to have 19 counties. So 19 counties fit the requirement where they use precinct-based voting in 2018 and then use vote center voting in 2022. So we have 19 counties that were to fit into this analysis. So here's what we found. What we found is that on average, they used, again, 39% fewer poll workers. So counties that were precinct-based in 2018 and then moved to vote centers used approximately 39% fewer poll workers. So again, that number 30% seems to be flowing through here pretty consistently. Again, we used the controls. So we had some control counties that we saw from precinct to precinct. They did not change. They also, yet again, have more efficient elections. This should be great news to everybody. Elections are becoming more efficiently run as time goes on here in Indiana. And so, even our precinct-based counties are finding ways to run elections more efficiently. Again, you can see here that for those counties, it was about a 22% difference when you mandated for the control. So we did the same thing. We grouped them by size and we looked at the midterm elections. So again, for our small counties, as you can see, 37% fewer poll workers. And then they use 14% fewer poll workers for our small counties. And that equates total to a 23% reduction in poll workers when looking at it. For our medium-sized counties, you can see, again, this one was a big difference in our medium-sized counties for the midterm elections. Nearly 40% fewer poll workers were used when those counties switched to 29%, again, precinct-based, also lessening the amount of poll workers that they need. And so that aggregates to about a 12% difference. So our vote center counties are using on average our medium-sized counties are using on average about 12% fewer poll workers when compared to their precinct counterparts. For our large counties, again, not many. Here we have St. Joseph County. It was the only county that met in that requirement that had switched. As you can see, a huge difference. If you just look at the raw data there, 438 fewer poll workers they utilized from the 2018 to 2022 election. That is largely significant for St. Joseph County. And then for our non-vote center county, Monroe, again, is the only county that then fits this requirement. And then they used 13% fewer poll workers. So they also ran a more efficient election. But as you can see, that still equates to a 34% aggregated difference when you look at those controls. For extra large counties, we didn't have any that fit this requirement, so we couldn't actually look at those on an individual basis. So we also wanted to look at poll workers because now we found if they're using less poll workers in this aggregated 2016 to 2024, let's deep dive and let's look just alone at 2024. I thought it would be a really good idea since we just had this election and it's the most current and recent data we have to really dig a little bit deeper into 2024. So we utilized the turnout, so the exact same numbers, but you may see that counties fell into different categories. And this is because we only used the 2024 turnout numbers for the 2024 analysis. So you may see some counties that have jumped in between and switched. And that's because we weren't using that 8-year average turnout anymore. We were using that just the 2024 turnout numbers. So this is a big slide. So you can feel free to take a photo of it if anybody wants to, but we're going to break it down and kind of make some things make sense here. So on average, small vote center counties needed 3 fewer poll workers in the 2024 general election. They were able to service, though, even though they needed fewer poll workers, small counties were able to service, vote center counties were able to service 58 additional voters per poll worker. So again, using fewer poll workers and able to service more voters. Our medium vote center counties use 41 fewer poll workers. So this is a significant difference, about 41 fewer poll workers than compared to our 2024 precinct counties. And they were able to service an additional 80 people per poll worker. Our large counties used, again, significant difference, 198 fewer poll workers, and then we're able to service 94 additional voters per poll worker. And in our extra large counties, they were not as efficient. So in our vote center counties, they utilized 564 more poll workers, and they service 41 fewer voters. Again, though, what I will say with this is that something to consider is what is called super precincting. And so our large counties, they may combine multiple precincts together and have it at one location. So almost kind of like a vote center. And those super precincts could be a reason why they may have had to have more poll workers, as if they were lessening the amount of locations, they may have to have more staff to be able to staff those larger locations. So generally, what did we find? What we found is that vote center counties require pretty significantly fewer poll workers than our precinct-based counties. Again, you saw it on average, it was floating about 20 to 30% on average fewer poll workers for our vote center counties than our precinct-based counties. The transition, so when the counties switched, it had a very, very large impact on small and large counties. So the medium and extra large counties, they did see a decrease in need as well, but really where we found this significant was in small counties and large counties. When they switch from precinct to vote center, they are saving significantly on their poll worker staffing. In 2024, small, medium, and large counties service more voters with fewer poll workers, which was a pretty unique finding. And then, of course, then our extra large counties kind of fell outside of that realm. So then we decided to take a look at equipment. You guys have to bear with me. I got the long part of the presentation, so hopefully I'm not boring you all too much. So we decided to look at equipment. Here's what we found. We found that we couldn't do a proper analysis on equipment, and here's why. Equipment costs vary so greatly across the state. Okay, so from county to county, it can vary tens and 20s of 30s of thousands of dollars for a county, depending on the contract that they have reached with their voting system vendor. So for example, some counties may have a yearly contract where they're coming in. Some counties may have on an as-needed based contract, so then they bill by the hour. Some counties have election day specific contracts that are different than their year-long contracts. And so it was simply that the fact that there's 92 counties and there's 92 different ways of doing everything, and that's really what we found with our equipment usage. We also found that transitioning from a precinct-based to vote center model is likely not going to yield much cost savings because they already have enough equipment. So they've already purchased all of the equipment. For example, Allen County is looking right now to switch to vote centers, and they're in the process of doing that right now. And they already have said as a part of their plan that even though they're planning to go from maybe 110 locations to 39, which sounds like a big difference, they're planning to deploy the same amount of equipment. So there, it's not going to yield any cost savings for a county like Allen County when it comes to their equipment. Counties using DREs, which Allen County does, as you can see, they're still going to need the same amount of equipment to maintain the proper flow of the election. If you try to lower the amount of equipment, that could create long lines and wait times. And so counties have to adjust for those things. And really lowering the amount of equipment is not a good option for them. We did find, though, that counties using optical scan systems, they may find savings in going to a vote center model because they may need fewer electronic tabulators. But really, again, across the board, we could not find anything super definitive. So then we decided to dig into 2024 and continue to look at voting locations. We thought that it would be a good idea. When we found that there was a very significant need for fewer poll workers, I figured, well, that's probably because they need fewer locations. And that is definitely what we found. So using the same exact county justifications as before, we decided to group them by size. So again, busy slide, but I will hopefully make some sense into you. Make this make sense for you. So what we had found is that on average, vote center counties have more precincts. So these counties have more precincts, yet have fewer locations and are able to service approximately 1 to 1.5 more precincts per location. And that makes sense, right? When you go to a vote center model, typically you're lowering the number of locations you have. But again, what you're finding though is these are counties that have significantly right now, the vote center counties are servicing and have a lot more precincts, yet they are servicing they're servicing more voters with fewer number of locations. So this is actually, I kind of wanted to show you all so you can see a little bit of visual representation here. But as you can see here on the black is our non-vote center counties and the red are vote center counties. So in our small counties, you can see they have significantly on average more precincts. So that's that row on the left there that you're seeing on that graph. Here, this is what you're seeing here. So this is the precinct count. So as you can see, they have significantly more precincts in our vote center counties, yet fewer locations. They are averaging 2 fewer locations than our precinct-based counties. As you can see there in our medium size, the effect is even greater. So they have arguably the same number of precincts, 45 and 48, so arguably the same average number of precincts. Yet look at that difference in locations. Our precinct-based counties, medium-sized counties are averaging 21 locations, and then our vote center counties are averaging 12. So again, large significant difference there in how many locations our medium-sized counties are servicing. When you look at our large counties as well, here on the left-hand side, you can see again, significantly more precincts they have to offer, and yet here they are offering 4 less locations on average than our precinct-based counties. So, and then in our extra large counties, which again, we only have 5, so there's not many, you can see again, significantly more precincts. So our vote centers have a ton of precincts. So there's a very logical reason why they would want to switch to vote centers when they have so many precincts, is to make elections more efficient, and that's what they're doing. Our large counties serviced on average for precinct base about 137 locations on average in the 2024 election, compared to our vote center counties at 113 locations. So again, significantly fewer locations. So when we take a look and we actually summarize these findings, just so that way you can see, on average, counties that are utilizing vote centers are using fewer locations. What does that mean? That means that really realistically, this could make the administering of the election easier for those election officials who have to conduct the election, because they have fewer locations to staff and then have fewer locations to coordinate across their county. We did see that most of the time vote center counties have more precincts in them, yet are servicing fewer locations. And then again, we're not really looking at the direct cost savings of the locations, because many counties don't really incur significant costs to actually like rent out a location. They're getting these locations arguably for a low cost or not at all to the county. And so we can't really do a cost analysis on how much cost savings there would be to actual locations, but just from a practical nature, right, it's much easier to staff 7 locations than staff 12. Right? So just from the coordination of an election standpoint could be it. So let's talk money. So this is going to be, again, looking at 2024 specifically. This is a busy slide. But what we did is we looked across, we were able to collect data, thank you to the Secretary of State's office. We had about 50 counties who completed a survey. And in that survey, it allowed us to be able to take information from that. So 32 of those counties operated with vote centers, 18 of them operated with precinct-based models. What we were able to do is we were able to get the base pay reported for poll workers. So we took the lowest cost, right? So if they're paying their clerks, they may pay election clerks $100, they may pay their judges $125, and they may pay their inspector $150. Well, there's only 1 inspector and there may be 5 clerks. So we thought, let's use the lower end to make it a more realistic analysis. So we took whatever the lowest number that they gave us in terms of how much they pay their poll staff. And we utilized that. And then we multiplied that number by the total number of poll workers they used in the 2024 election to get us the approximate cost that it cost them to run the election or to staff the election, pardon me. And then what we also did is we used the CEB9 data. So every county is required to report their basically an overview of the election after it happens. We utilized that estimated election budget number that was reported in the CEB9. And we utilized that number and divided it by the total amount that they spent paying their poll workers to get an average on how much the counties were spending on their poll workers. Again, this is a hard graph to read. So here, I'm kind of going to break it down for you. So what we found is that precinct-based counties served more voters on average than vote center counties and required more poll workers to do so. That makes sense at first glance, right? You serve more voters, you're going to need more poll workers. But what we did is we actually took and did an analysis that looked at voters per poll worker. So now, regardless of county size, we're getting an individual metric. So for each poll worker, this is on average how many voters that poll worker can serve. What we found is that our vote center counties serviced on average 35 more voters per poll worker. So vote center counties are servicing more more voters with fewer poll workers. What we found is that precinct-based counties needed more staff, right, to staff all of those precincts, and they spent nearly 50% more on their poll worker pay. So as you can see here, this is the average cost for our vote center counties to pay their poll workers. It was $15,912. Again, this is a low-end estimate. I would bet that number is higher, actually, when you look at it because of the differences in pay that they pay their staff. But we are looking at a low-end approximate, as at $15,000, whereas our non-vote center counties, on average, spent about $28,000 on their poll worker cost. So actually, and as you can see here, on average, the non-vote center counties averaged 199 poll workers to run the 2024 election for their counties, whereas the vote center counties used 113, so far fewer poll workers. So then actually I decided to go a little bit further with this analysis, and I said, let me take the difference. So 199 minus 113 is 86. And I decided to take 86 poll workers and multiply it by that base pay of $139. And what did we end up with? $12,000. So nearly the difference in the cost spendings that our vote center counties were paying. I'm actually going to use a very realistic and real example. Monroe County is currently in the process of trying to investigate whether or not they would like to use vote centers. One of the current plans that was proposed by the election committee decided that they were going to take their current 29 locations and bump them down to 22 locations. So they would be removing 7 locations as they switch from precinct-based to vote center-based. Well, what their vote center committee found was that that would create a reduction of nearly 50 poll workers needed to run a general election, which would save the county nearly $15,000. So again, right on par with exactly what our research is showing. We also decided to take a look at cost per voter. So this allows us again to really drill down and find what is it going to be a cost per voter. So then regardless of what the turnout looks like, we could do an aggregated model to find what the average cost per voter was. So we're going to look at 2 different cost per voter analyses. One is from 2012 to 2024, and then the other is just looking a little bit deeper into 2024. So this analysis utilized all 92 counties using that CEB9 estimated budget cost for the election from 2012 to 2024. And then we decided to code each year whether they were a vote center or not. So over time, we were able to see as counties adopt more vote centers, does it change the cost per voter? This is what we found. This is a busy slide. So again, bear with me here. So the ebb and flow, as you can see, we don't really have a very consistent election budget and election costs, okay? It's kind of all over the board depending on the election. I think a lot of that can do with what's going on in the country, right? Is it going to be a contested election where turnout's expected to be higher? So county clerks need to invest a little bit more to have more staff, more locations, or maybe adjust those plans. Or is it a lower participation election where they're not expecting to spend as much money? As you can see, typically on midterm elections, they're spending a little bit less, and on general elections, they're spending more. But as you can see, regardless of vote centers or precinct base, they are ebbing and flowing the same way. So vote centers and precincts, they're spending more on elections. All of them are spending more. If they're spending less, they're all spending less. But what we found is over time, from 12 years, that vote centers, the cost is slowly decreasing. And again, that doesn't mean that elections are becoming cheaper. I'm not saying that. We're saying that if the trend were to continue, vote centers may end up being a little bit more affordable in terms of their elections over time when looking at cost per voter. Whereas over time, we're finding that our precinct-based counties, it's becoming a little bit more expensive. Again, we're looking at 12 years. Okay, realistically, if this study was looking at 45 years, that trend line would be able to be much more solid. Okay, that's why I'm saying, I'm like, let's take it at face value of what it is. But what we can really show, and the really great thing, is over here on our vote center per year. So in 2012, vote center spent about $1.58 more per voter. And I was like, you know what? There was only 4 counties, 5 counties at this time. They're trying to figure it out. They probably had to spend a little bit more money at that point to figure things out. But after that, the cost savings were identified. So in 2014, on average, the vote center county saved 45 cents per voter. In 2016, they saved an average of 88 cents per voter. In 2018, they saved an average of $1.02 per voter. And in 2022, they saved an average of $1.34 per voter. And then in 2024, it was the greatest difference yet. We found that our precinct-based counties spent $2.04 more. So our vote center counties saved on average $2.04 per voter in 2024. So as you can see, the cost savings are also increasing over time. So the cost disparity is elections, as you can see, are generally somewhat getting a little bit more expensive. We're seeing the disparity, though, in the cost, and it really lies with our precinct-based county spending on average about $2 more per voter. So let's dig into 2024. So again, this used all 92 counties using the same exact size jurisdictions as before. So those counties should all look the same to you. And here's what we found. We also decided to take a look at equipment. So here in Indiana, there are 2 different main types of equipment that is utilized. We have direct record electronic systems. So you may see those in my home county of Delaware and counties like Hamilton and Allen County. They use direct record. So for any of you who don't know, those are the gray panels with the white or orange buttons. So for those of you who are voting on those systems. Or we have what's called optical scan systems, which is where you have paper ballot cards, and those paper ballot cards are being entered into electronic tabulators. So those are the 2 kinds of systems. We have those in Marion County. Monroe County uses those systems as well. And so just in case you were curious on kind of what counties are using those. So those are the 2 main pieces, types of election equipment that are being used. So here's what we found. For a small county using direct record electronics, they saved on average 80 cents per voter compared to precinct-based DRE counties. For our small optical scan counties, big savings there for our optical scan small counties, they saved on average $2.33 when compared to precinct-based per voter. This is all per voter. For our medium DRE counties, they saved on average $2.27 compared to their precinct-based counterparts. The medium OpScan counties saved on average $2.85 when compared to their precinct-based counterparts. We did not have any large DRE counties that are vote centers that fit into that, but we did find that our large optical scans counties actually spend more. Again, I do believe that with a substantiated analysis, that cost may actually invert. I believe that there may be some data that has a little bit of inconsistent data in the budgeting for our large counties. And if we were to actually adjust to what was actually spent in the election, I bet that number would actually be almost 0 or would invert to a cost savings. So again, that is a caveat to that $2 increase, but the data is the data. That's what the data shows, is that our large optical scan counties spent more. Just breaking it down by equipment type. So this is only based on direct record electronic and optical scan paper ballot card systems. We found that our DRE costs are actually less. So counties that use direct record electronic systems spend on average about $3, almost $3 less per voter than our optical scan counties. So our optical scans counties are spending $7.65. I would almost bet, though, that the cost is not actually on election day, it's the early voting cost, because they need ballots, envelopes, and many things that DRE counties do not utilize in their early voting process. So I would not say that that is indicative of an election day cost. I think that that cost increase is really indicative of the big difference in budgeting that DRE counties have to use versus our optical scan counties. When you do break it down, though, as you can see, our DRE vote center counties run the most cost-effective elections at $3.62 per voter. The precinct DRE counties are still a little bit cheaper than our optical scan systems per voter at $4.57. The vote center optical scan counties spend about $7.47 per voter, whereas the precinct-based spend about $7.90. So what did we find? Let me make sure I'm on the right slide. So the average cost per voter has been similar over time. So as you know, elections get more expensive for vote center counties, they also get more expensive for precinct-based counties. So that's what we find, regardless of their voting method. The length of time that a county has operated as a vote center also does not change significantly in terms of the cost to run an election. So whether a county has switched for 2 elections or they've switched since 2010, the cost is really not changing based on how long they've been a vote center. We found that over a 12-year period, the average cost per voter in Indiana was $5.02 for our Indiana counties, or for our vote center counties, and $6.50 over that 12-year period for our precinct-based counties. That represents a cost savings of about $1.48 per voter over the cost of those 12 years. So again, you take $1.48 times those 8 elections, that could be pretty significant. During this period, the cost per voter in precinct-based counties trended upwards, as you saw, whereas vote center counties trended downward. Again, though, due to significant county to county variation, I would not heavily rely on that data trend. In 2024, this was the largest cost savings out of any of the elections that we analyzed. Vote Center saved approximately $2.04 per voter relative to the precinct-based counties. Based on the 2024 data, Vote Center counties using DREs had the lowest cost to run their elections at cost per voter, though Vote Center counties using optical scans did experience significant cost savings as well. That is it for me. I appreciate you all bearing with me. I had a lot to go through. Dr. Kinsella is going to take some time just to finish us out on the voter turnout portion.
When we started this, I told Matt that it's like, hey, I've got an idea. We should do this study. It'll take us like a couple of days. And I was like, I'll do the turnout and the voter experience. I'll let you have the easy part and look at like equipment and the number of people working. So thank you, Matt, for being a good sport. And you'll see the discrepancy here in my slides versus his slides. So what we did is a difference on difference analysis. And again, it's a statistical way of looking at the differences. It looks across time and during the same election and then across time with elections. And so what we use is Indiana's official turnout numbers. What I did is I did 2 different types, and you'll see this on the next screen. Is I took the registered number of voters and created a turnout, and then we took the number based on the census of eligible voters. And so we created 2 different turnouts just to look at it, just to be safe and make sure that we did our due diligence. The findings, although vote center counties, they do have higher turnout, they didn't come out as statistically significant. And I think one of the most important things to add in here is one of the things that we're going to add on the next iteration, I was hoping to have it done today, but didn't get a chance to do it, but is to add in demographics. So again, there's 3 key demographics. Again, this is putting on my political science hat that explain turnout. And again, the older you are, the more likely you are to vote. The more wealth you have, the more likely you are to vote. And the more education you have, the more likely you are to vote. And so once we put those in, I think that a lot of the turnout data that you're getting ready to see will probably be washed out washed out being like statistically, it won't be significant anymore. And again, I think the example I used last time, Matt and I were talking about Hamilton County. So in terms of like efficiency, Hamilton County is a precinct-based county, although talking about moving to vote centers. But anyway, run a very efficient election. And again, their turnout is the highest in the state. And again, Hamilton County has a lot of those key demographics that we associate with high turnout. With that said, again, another lots of, again, this would be worse at an academic conference. Like this is what you have to look at the entire time across like hundreds of presentations. So count yourself lucky. But anyway, so we have non-vote center registered voter turnout, vote center registered turnout, and a difference, and then non-vote center turnout with eligible voter age, and then another one with vote center with eligible voter age turnout, and then the difference. And you can see across the board for each one of the years that we did. So we did this from 2010 to 2024 and throughout 2020, that the turnout is higher with vote center counties. Again, not controlling for any of those key variables. And again, that's a key caveat that I want to throw in there, because I do believe when we throw this in there, this is all going to be not a lot, but there is that, and there is a possibility, given the numbers are high, that there might be something. So some of the midterm turnout numbers, like for 2010, and I think it was 2014, were low enough that they might be significant. Again, we've got to add all those in there, and again, that which might kind of prove into the literature that like when you have those very, very low turnout elections, vote centers might make a tiny, to borrow a word from my wife, a smidge of a difference with turnout. But again, so you can see here, again, vote center counties do tend to have higher turnout, not significant amounts of turnout when we did like a t-test, which is just like, is this significantly different from this? They never came out significant, but we're going to add some of those different control variables in there. Age 18 to 34% in a county, median income, and percent with a bachelor's degree or more in a county. And I think that a lot of this will wash out. We haven't had a chance to do that, but I will get to that. Voter experience. So what we did is, again, another t-test. It's a very simple, like a very base level statistical analysis. And really all it does is like, is there a difference between these two different things? And again, it's easy to do because, we could just put, it has a vote center or it doesn't for each county. And so what happened is, at MIT, they do this analysis. They do a giant survey, and I think they get about 12,000 people nationwide. They're not looking at just Indiana, but anyway, but they get nationwide, and they just ask them about a whole battery of questions about voter experience. We took 4 of them. And again, these 4 questions have been used by a lot of different studies that looked at vote centers. It was, how easy was it to find your voting location? How well organized was your voting location, or how well run was it? How much time did it take for you to vote at your voting location? And then basically how nice were the poll workers at your location? And so we took those 4 questions and looked at them. And again, so that we have it from 2012 to 2024. That should be 2024. 2018, they did not run it. I asked them why, and they said, we didn't have the money. So we missed out on that year. But so what you see here, and again, a busy, so here's how difficult was it to find your polling place? How well run is the polling place? Approximately how long did you wait in line? And rate the job of the poll workers done. And what you see is, and again, the place with stars indicates statistical significance. And basically what you can see here, I think the long story short, which I'm terrible at because I'm an academic, but is a lot of this, there's not a whole lot of difference in voter experience, at least in here. So again, there is a low end. So typically when we look at just the Indiana sample that was done by MIT, it ranges from about 200 to 300 people. And then of those 200 to 300 people, we can only grab those that voted on election day. And so what you see is kind of early on, there was some significance in how long they had to wait in line. So vote centers, they had to wait less in line. They had the opposite experience of what my dad did. But anyway, but then it kind of goes away. There was something in 2022 that it might have been a little bit easier for that population to find that year. But again, it wasn't very significant. But overall, maybe the good or the bad news is there's not like a huge discrepancy in the voter experience. And generally speaking, it doesn't matter if we look at the MIT data. There was a group of people in Texas that had their undergrads hand out like surveys and they use these same questions. And generally what you find is, but if you look at any of the MIT years or the Texas and Harris County, so on and so forth, generally people like the way elections are done. They have they skew very, very positive. So it's very hard to find things, there's not a whole lot of people who answer negatively in this. But again, so overall, not a huge difference in the vote center experience, at least from the sample that we were able to pull from the years from the MIT survey. Which gets us into this again, not a huge, and again, so there were maybe shorter lines, and overall, like early on, people said that it was a little bit easier to find, or I'm sorry, had a little bit less of a wait than their precinct, than those in precinct counties. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys so much for those great presentations. We will now move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. You are invited to provide comments on the topics presented. For purposes of the study and out of respect of other audience members who want to speak, please keep your comments contained to the topics being discussed today. If you begin to go off topic, we will remind you of the topics that we are discussing today. If you continue to not provide comments related to the presentations, you will be gently cut off. We hope to include public comments in some way in the final report to the General Assembly. If before you make your comments, you have a clarifying question related to the data presented, we will answer those questions. Outside of those clarifications, for the sake of time, we will not be answering other questions today. You may ask questions as part of your remarks, and we will take note of those, and we will do our best to get back to you. So again, if you haven't signed up and put your email down on our sign-up sheets, you may want to do that just so that we have a way to contact you afterward. Please state your name, county you are from, and who you are representing if applicable for the record. And to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We will call names one at a time from the slips that were handed to me. Please raise your hand and I will bring a microphone to you to ask your questions or make your remarks. Hello, hello. Okay. Jen.
Speaking to here today. Okay, hi. Well, I'm Jen Debar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Secretary Morales and all the election officials here. I come to speak in opposition of vote centers, and I think they're very convenient, and I've had a good experience. They're like, why would you be against vote centers? The main reason is a few things. The e-poll books, they are connected to the internet. And we've had issues with them in Indiana, which I'll go through later. Everything's hackable. We've had even our own electoral system here in Indiana. In 2016, we had over 14,000 incursions per the Secretary of State at that time, Connie Lawson. So I think, I know in my life I've had who's had their data stolen. You get the letter, your data's been stolen. And so I do have concerns about that. So that is one thing. We've had 3 major issues with vote centers in Indiana. There was the Johnson County fiasco a few years ago, where there was huge lines because the e-poll books didn't work. We had actually, when they first started, I think it was Stark County, I could be wrong on that when they punch in the codes for those, again, e-poll books that are connected to the internet, the they punched in the wrong code, and we had Indiana Hoosiers voting on California ballots, believe it or not. I mean, how is that possible? You know, and then Fayette County, they actually were on vote centers, and then they got off of them because they found out that they had a primary election where they voted, and then after the end of the election, they found out a couple people weren't eligible to vote. So they were able to pull those people votes. Well, how's that possible? Because of e-poll books. So it's connected. They were able to go in and invalidate two of the people that had already voted. And also the other one thing, I don't like the signature pads on e-poll books. You know, they usually compare it to the DMV, and I don't feel like it always really looks like my signature. The other thing, tell me if I'm doing okay on time. I don't know if it's constitutional vote centers. If you look in the Indiana Constitution, it says you have to vote in that precinct. So I'm not sure if those centers, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so ask a lawyer or someone smarter than me on that. And the RNC actually passed a resolution a few years ago saying no to vote centers. They may, according to the RNC and their resolution, be more discriminatory towards older conservative voters. Because it's harder to go, hey, I'm going to go down to the stadium to vote at the vote center versus they might go to the little school next door. Other fun fact about vote centers, they were brought to Indiana by the uber left organization, the JEHT Foundation. Okay.
3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So no on vote centers, but I love y'all. So no matter how you. And thank you again.
Dawn. Hey, name, county, and if you're with an organization.
My name's Dawn Rogers. I'm from Hamilton County. Okay, my name's Dawn Rogers. I'm from Hamilton County. So I had
Technical difficulties. Yeah. It's just because it's so busy, it's just easier for me to get to you. Hello, better.
There we go.
We will fix it. Dawn, third time's the charm.
Okay, well, I didn't really have a comment. I had a couple questions for them. But I need to look at my sheet.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So I got here a few minutes late, sorry, a little crazy downtown parking. I'm not used to that. So I want somebody to be specific about what a vote center is. Because we're talking about it all day and I was a little late, so you might have actually talk about that, but I think we need to know the definition of what we're discussing.
Yeah, give me just a second here.
I don't have the exact code definition, but I'll give
Yeah.
you sort of the general
looking for
overview. He was looking for the exact code. Vote center is a voting location within the county that any voter in the county can vote at. Compare that to precinct-based voting, where you have to go to your specific precinct to vote. So that's a general overview.
Okay, so on election day, they
You can
go
go
wherever in the state?
Within the county you are registered in, so.
Okay, all right. So I heard the presentation. I really respect all the hours you guys must have put into that. There's a lot of data there. And you told me a lot of great things about what this is going to do for us. What I haven't heard is what's the downside. I got a good sales job and that's great. And it's all wonderful. What's the downside? And I know there has to be one. So just tell us the downside to it.
Well, I'll just speak on behalf of my data and my data only. The data is the data. So I simply shared with you the analysis of the data that we were asked to look at. I think that if you are really, serious about considering, I'm not speaking for or against today. That's not my position nor my job. My job was to look at the data and to do the data analysis, and that's what was presented today.
Thank you. I think we're out of time.
Okay, I think one more time.
Oh, okay.
Joy? Joy.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Joy Martin. I'm from Brown County. And I'm a retired electrical engineer. I worked in the automation controls industry, building engines on assembly lines. And so I have a unique perspective on electronic voting systems all involved. And my understanding is the vote center requires e-poll books, which must be on the internet. And therefore, the internet has access to those e-poll books. And every programmer knows that there's a backdoor to every electronic device, which can be breached. And if you just know your way in, as any one of us knows how to get on Amazon, a nefarious actor knows how to get on an e-poll book or any computerized device out there. So I am opposed to these. And not only have you mentioned on the downside is the cost. You did not include the cost. There are license fees for equipment and software leasing fees for hardware. And all of that has to be paid every single year in non-election years. When you have poll workers, you have people involved who are voting for their community. You don't have a computer system that you can't see behind. You can't see what's involved in making those tallies or the registrations, if they're good or they're not good. You can't see any of that. And back to what the First Lady said, the poll books make your vote not confidential. It ties, the e-poll book ties a barcode to the printing of that ballot to what is tabulated, and that's how they can pull it out. And that is not a good system to have. That is not what people are expecting. They're expecting their ballots to be private. Thank you.
Cecilia?
Cecilia Pointer, Marion County. Of course, Marion County has the polling centers, which I appreciated when I worked, because if you work for a company like I did, where they can mandate you to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, you cannot make it to the polls. I could not leave Northwest Indiana, or Northwest Indianapolis, sorry, to where I live, southeast, and make it to the polls on time, unless I left work early, which was not allowed. Y'all want to fix that? That's great. But I could not say it's against the law for you to not allow me to go vote, because it's not. So for those of us that work long hours, whether it's early voting or regular on voting day, poll centers are great. Because I would vote Northwest Indianapolis. Now that I'm retired, it doesn't really matter. As a poll worker, I do find that the poll centers are faster for the poll workers, but reducing the places you can go is not good for voters, because Franklin Township, I go up and down Arlington all the time. The one and only place at the Franklin Township, whatever it's called, by the fire station, every day for that 1 week, I would just keep going, turn around, come back, keep going, turn around and come back until I could not anymore. Had to go wait in line for 3 hours. It went all the way into the neighborhood and wound around the neighborhood. People are on the busy street of Arlington standing, waiting in line. I think you need more centers in Marion County. And for these smaller counties, you can be for or against whatever you want, unless you live in a large county and a large township. The voting centers are great, but we need more, is what I'm saying. More for early voting, as well as on election day. That's it.
Thank you so much. Pauline?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks very much. I'm Pauline Spiegel from Marion County. I am very pleased to hear you analyze this with respect to the amount of money that elections cost. I have a reform in mind that will save even more money. I do support election centers. I think that it does contribute both to efficiency and to voter experience. Though I can tell you in Marion County, the reason you need more workers is because of the transients and the students, and they take up an awful lot of time because usually they are misregistered and need attention. It is also true that my one concern is in rural districts where if vote centers are instituted, it's possible that somebody who has trouble with mobility might have to go further. And I hope next time you do your analysis, you will compare rural and urban districts. Finally, my optical scanning, I think, is preferable for all the people who are worried about recording votes, because then you have a piece of paper that you can go back and verify. Finally, my best recommendation for cost savings is voting by mail, and that takes care of the travel and it takes care of the misregistration. And so with that, I end my comments and thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy? Heinesen? Okay. Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Housley, but does that count against my 3 minutes?
If it's a clarifying question, they can answer it.
Okay, yeah, it's a clarifying question.
I don't want to block you from.
Oh, that's all right. Amy Heneisen, Marion County, actually Franklin Township also. I happen to be a precinct committeeman, but I'm here as myself. My question for you, you mentioned several times about that vote centers that counties that use vote centers require fewer poll workers, and that they are able to service more voters per poll worker, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You did not explain how because to me, obviously, I don't have all the statistical wizardry that you all have. And so I don't want to be presumptuous, but it seems to me, and I think to most people here, that data could also be interpreted to mean, there are a number of reasons that there might be fewer poll workers. It could be related to vote centers. It could be that there are fewer people turning out to volunteer, correct?
Correct.
So how did you account for that in your data analysis?
Yeah, so when we did the cost per poll worker, we actually used an aggregated 12-year turnout. So we're not just looking at 1 year. I did do a 2024 analysis, which you'd seen, but the 2012 to 2024 utilized an 8-year average turnout that then got us to cost per voter.
I know, how do you, were you able to account, and forgive me, I'm not a statistical person, and there was flood of data, a tsunami of data up there. I'm not talking in this question about voter turnout. I'm talking about, so for Marion County, for example, and I'm just using that as an example, and pardon it, it doesn't really fit because I know they used more poll workers. But say Joe Smith County used, only required 100 poll workers for vote centers instead of 150. Well, is that because they required less or because they just couldn't recruit the full 150? That's my question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I will not speak to a county individually. I just don't have the ability to do that.
That is a valid.
But what I will say is, for example, I'll use 2 tangible examples for you. So Monroe County was looking, right now they use precinct-based models at 29 locations. They found that if they dropped that and moved to vote centers and used 22 locations, that would save approximately 50 poll workers. In Allen County, they're also doing the same thing. They found that on average, it takes about 600 to 650 poll workers to run a general election. Their analysis found for their specific county that when they were to change to vote centers, they would require approximately 300 fewer poll workers, so about a 50% difference. So those are direct numbers in which those counties showcase those poll worker savings. So our data, of course, cannot control, right? There's plenty of things. And Dr. Kinsella also mentioned about how many factors go into running an election. So I can't say that we made a 100% control for everything, but in those 2 counties specifically, their data aligns to the data which we presented today.
Okay, thank you for that
Yeah,
explanation.
absolutely.
So now I'll start my favorite.
The 3 minutes started when you were asking.
Oh.
I asked you a question.
They didn't count.
I asked you before, if I asked a question, I asked you, will it
Yeah.
count?
Okay.
For my presentation. Thank you so much. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yeah, I understand. You're the enforcer, the messenger. So I have actually worked at a vote center in my township as well as at Central Count here on election day. And I oppose the use of vote centers, and so does actually the Republican National Committee. As somebody else already mentioned, that exactly 2 years ago at a meeting of the RNC, a resolution urging return to excellence in American voting and elections was unanimously passed by everyone present. The resolution states, the Republican National Committee calls on all Republican office holders, this includes you, Secretary Morales, to defend the historic practice of geographically defined and assigned precinct, ward, and localized polling places for means of balloting and tabulating paper ballots by geographic unit. Precinct-based voting preserves the Republican values stated in the Indiana GOP party platform. The government closest to the people is the best government. We all know that precincts are the most local unit of government here in Indiana. Precinct-based voting restores the ability to recount local elections such as school boards, township offices, city council members, and even state reps or senators. Currently in Marion County, these closest to the people, elected officials, have no way to contest a close election. Given 350,000 ballots cast in the 24 election, there's simply no reasonable way to find the ballots cast for, say, my local school board candidates or my state rep and recount them, as they are commingled amongst the rest of the ballots countywide. This is a disservice and injustice to our local elected officials, as it deprives them of their right to a recount. Finally, precinct-based voting allows for the elimination of the internet-connected e-poll books that are a requirement of vote center voting. Not only are these internet-connected e-poll books susceptible to foreign and domestic hacking, they don't reliably record the vote history of all Hoosiers. After the 2020 elections, there were questions about inaccuracies in the recorded vote histories of some voters. A grassroots election integrity group in Indiana went door to door to over 3,000 homes across 6 counties, representing a diverse group of voters. They talked with voters in 37% of these homes and found a jaw-dropping 40% of voter vote histories had anomalies, ranging from the wrong method of vote, i.e. recorded as absentee when the person voted in person or the opposite, all the way to lost votes. These voters submitted affidavits swearing they voted in the 2020 election, yet their vote histories recorded no record of their vote. Would you believe that over 7% of voters canvassed had these lost votes? How do you know that yours wasn't lost as well? Paper poll books at local precinct locations, as supported by the RNC Return to Excellence in Voting Resolution, are a more reliable form of documentation and less susceptible to outside manipulation than our e-poll books. Many officials express concern about recruiting enough poll workers to staff precinct polling places, and this makes sense. However, I believe that returning to precinct-based voting with hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots would make recruiting workers easier. Hoosiers will have greater trust in the process and have personal hands-on involvement in the counting process. As you all know, anytime that personal involvement increases, enthusiasm for the process increases with it. When I stood in line to vote in 24, I overheard many fellow voters express skepticism about the machines in the vote center. When I speak with neighbors, many feel disillusioned with our current voting process and are unmotivated to participate in the process. I am happy to contact my fellow precinct members, the people in my neighborhood, to work alongside me at our precinct polling place on election day. And with a turn to precinct-based, hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots, I think this would find many enthusiastic volunteers. Thank you.
Jennifer Lewis.
I'm Jennifer Lewis. I'm with the Vigo County Clerk's Office. I was wanting to make a comment regarding the municipal being moved to the presidential or even the midterm years. I don't agree with that personally. I think that keeping them in separate years would benefit the voters and our office as well. I'm in the absentee voters office, so I do make the mail out ballots and everything. One of my concerns is the size of the ballot that would have to be made going out. The ballot that we had last year was very large. If we would have added a municipal to that ballot, it would have been at least 2 pages. My concern with that is, how do we police if the voter doesn't turn in both of those pages back to us when they return them back? How do we know if that was intentional, or did they mean to not vote on the presidential race, but they wanted to vote on the municipal part of the ballot? The confusion for the the voters that live out of city and that wouldn't be able to vote on the municipal. We get a lot of grief with that on municipal years as it is anyhow, but I feel like that's going to add to the confusion as well when they come through, as well as the times we have for voting. It's 4-minute time frame right now. I don't know how many people really stick to that or have the voters move out, if they are behind the voting booth for longer than 4 minutes, but I can only imagine that there's people who are going to be behind even longer with the length of the ballot that it's going to be.
just like the confusion, again, with the difference between the municipal ballot versus the presidential, there's going to be a multitude of ballots that are going to be made because we're going to have some of the ones that, the people that can vote municipal, those precincts are going to have a larger ballot than the other precincts. The confusion, I feel like there's more room for error on the ballots when we have such a large ballot. The ballot proofing process already, I mean, we are very big sticklers with it. You want your ballot to be perfect. So I can only imagine the issues with that as well. And then as far as for vote center counties, we are a vote center county. We love it. Definitely recommend it. I think it's great. I think statewide, if we all went statewide, then the code could be changed to just vote center code. It would eliminate some confusion with some of the language in the books because we are some vote centers and some not. So that's just my thoughts on it. So
Thank you. Anne?
Hi. My name is Ann Eames from Howard County. I'm an elected precinct person, and definitions matter. I'm an engineer. So with the fact that it's not stated constitutionally that this is appropriate, that should have been a no-brainer from the beginning, not to allow non-precinct voting. I've worked elections my whole adult life, so I've hand counted in the past, and it's always been, it can be very efficiently and well done with well-trained people. I believe people are willing to work. It's just people don't know. People don't even know the need. So it can definitely work. We have 72 precincts in our county, and I've seen it work great. Sometimes we'll combine, precincts in the same location. No problem. So local voting is very important. And also the fact that precinct people, the way it's designed was that the precinct men would know the area very well. So you have some control over situations. The other main issue I've seen is the poll books are a horrible thing. They just, as they've already stated, they said they've been, we know they have to be connected to the internet because you have to know who's voted in the other voting centers. So they're just a design flaw in this whole problem. I've had where my poll book, I've been inspector, my poll book at my center did not match the poll book at the county courthouse during an election. It's like, good grief, that's a very major issue because we had voters that weren't showing up in our poll book that they said, yeah, they're in our poll book down at the county. So there's, and it's probably just dumb, programming errors, data entry, but yet it tells you how easily things cannot be done correctly by not having a set, written poll book at your location. Very major problem. I've also had where absentee ballots were printed. It was said absentee on election day. And see, that's another problem. Election day is a definition. We've changed that in our thinking to this 2-week process, which is just a major flaw when you change definitions. Well, that's voting centers. You can't have you can't have more than one day if you're using precincts, hon. So that is on topic. I'm sorry. Okay. The other part of this is the whole idea of just getting more people involved. That was my one question, hon. Good presentation. But were you talking about people or hours when you're using your data?
This is people. So this is the amount of persons needed.
Because it's hours would be more of an important look at how many man hours you're talking about involved. That would be very much more important, I think, than just the people.
It was very, very difficult. It would be very difficult to get 92 counties to explain. And if they have 198 poll workers, how many hours each one of those 198 poll workers spent on the election, and to do that across 92 counties. So I just utilized the person because it was the most readily available and consistent data that I could use. So just to provide a clarity. Absolutely. No, I totally understand about the expansion of the study, but just wanted to let you know that for clarifying.
Your goal, when you gave the goal, it's a biased goal that you already gave to estimate and analyze the cost savings. That was built into your goal. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, guys, you've got to be an unbiased analysis.
The state legislator explicitly required us to look at whether there was cost savings or personnel savings. So I just wanted to let you know that we took our directive directly from the Indiana legislature. We did not divert from that in any way. So I just wanted to make that very clear. whatever the legislator has asked us to do is what we did. So we did not divert or add any of our own political or personal biases. We just followed the law.
Karen?
For you.
I can,
That's all right, I got it. It's just
it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. I'm Karen Talion. I am the state party chair of the Indiana Democratic Party, and I am from Northwest Indiana. And I just want to say as a point of order that for those of us from Northwest Indiana, it is a 3-hour plus a time change to Muncie. It doesn't qualify as Northern Indiana. But I want to talk about municipal elections. I live in a small town. We have a town board of 6 plus a clerk treasurer. Several years ago, we changed to electing half of our people on each even numbered year. We do not need a statutory change in order to do that. Small towns are already able to do that if they wish. We decided to do it because it was cheaper for us. Most of our members run unopposed and as independents. So we also want to say that we do not support in any way forcing larger towns and municipalities to do this during on an even numbered year. We believe especially that because you've added school boards and you've added okay, I just can't stand it in my mouth.
Sorry, I'm right in your face.
Because we've added school boards and now you'd be adding 10 to 12 extra people on a ballot. It just makes things unwieldy. I also want to speak a little bit about vote centers. Doing vote centers is sort of like closing lanes on the tollway. You are going to use the same number of people and force them into smaller number of areas. So in order to accommodate that, you either have to do early voting, more days. You need to increase the number of hours. Our closing at 6 o'clock is one of the earliest closing times in the country. And we also want to make sure that people aren't driving 10, 15, 20 miles to get to a vote center. In my little town, we just had another anecdote. They just told us that our firehouse, where we've been voting for 75 years, is no longer going to be a voting place, but they're going to open a vote center. It's about 10 miles away, but for our convenience, they're going to keep it open for 2 weeks. That is kind of a wash, but if we had to leave our precinct and drive 10 miles to this vote center on election day, it would make a big difference to a lot of people. So we want to make sure. And the other thing is
So sorry.
okay,
Thank you.
I had a question about there.
Yeah, if you have a question.
I do have a question. We have about a third of the people vote early. In your analysis, did you take into account in terms of costs, the early vote costs for keeping people at early vote centers? And did you keep in track of how much time people spent in line?
So we did not track the timing. In terms of the CEB 9, that gives the budgeted election cost. So that is the total 2024 general election cost. So that includes the early voting cost as well as the election day cost. The poll worker numbers that I used were the total number of poll workers that were used to conduct the 2024 general election. So that included both early vote poll workers as well as election day poll workers.
Okay, thank you. And I know, I'm sorry, I'm like right in your face, but I just need people to be able to hear us. Okay, Blythe.
My name is Blythe Potter. I am a Johnson County resident, precinct White River 09 chair, chapter lead for Indiana's Hoosier Bitches Get Stuff Done, and I am seeking the Democratic Party nomination for Indiana Secretary of State next year. So it seems like having more poll workers could decrease the lines and wait time for voting, possibly boost our local economies by providing income from the poll workers to our counties, which is our tax dollars coming back to our communities, increase overall civic engagement because we have more poll workers, including the opportunity for high school students who can use working the polls as an excused absence, and again, more civic engagement, and also ensure a more fair and seamless election process because there are more people making them more secure, and we all love more secure voting. I'm also not sure why we can't have precinct voting locations, but also be able to vote at any precinct location in our county, but I guess that's another topic. It's also interesting to note that 2020 and 2023 were omitted from this data, which is interesting. And we aren't seeing how our voter turnout overall in the country has decreased over the last 4 years or 12 years, especially the last 4 years. I think voter education and turnout are worth the investment of our tax dollars, and that seems to be lacking because we remain at the bottom 10 across the country for turnout. And it's only gotten worse. Marion County has hours worth of waiting time and is a vote center county. I was visiting a friend last year in Perry Township for early voting. She stayed out there for hours. Hendricks County, which is also a vote center, had irregularities reported last year with potentially hundreds of ballots left uncounted in a tight race in 2024. So we could argue that because they had fewer people working the polls, they were more overwhelmed by having fewer resources and likely a larger volume of voter traffic. I'm opposed to changing the municipal and midterm elections because that just doesn't make any sense to me other than to holding on to your spots. And if cost savings are what we are worried about, I think it's best to look at the overall spending of the Secretary of State's office and not just the cost of vote centers and voting locations. Spending less of our tax dollars on voting seems to mean lower turnout, less fair elections, less voter access. And if we save money on how we vote, where is this saved money going? Are we getting that back? The tax dollars spent on elections should be used on elections, not SUVs, world travel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sandra? Okay, sorry.
Yep, I got you. First off, thank you guys so much. I know there's a lot of work gone into this and I've struggled with some of these numbers myself. So my first question to you is, will this data be made available to us and the sources that you guys use for the data that was presented today? And
Yes,
if so, where can we find that? Can you give us information on
We
that?
plan on, after we host the public meetings, to post them on our website, and obviously the report will be submitted to the General Assembly as well, and that will be made public.
Excellent, thank you. And so nice thing about going a little later is some of you have already asked some of the questions, and one was related to number of poll workers versus the hours of poll workers, and I think that's very important. One data set we do have, which is the Gateway Financial Report, reports the dollar amount spent by election, and there's a section in there that's called personal services. So you can download all of that data for all the counties at one time. You can look at that number, and for my estimation, all counties combined, we have an average increase in personal services, which should be, if the reporting was done correctly, should be poll workers, an increase of 30,000 from the last 2 presidential elections. If you look at all the expenses reported for elections, it's up 76,000. So the cost savings, we need to get a good control on that. So those are a couple of my comments. If I read the HEA 1633 correctly, this meeting was a required meeting to analyze the data. And one of the last items was an effort to require all counties to use vote centers. And I guess that concerns me quite a bit because I took an oath to the Constitution of the state of Indiana. And I just want to remind all of us what the Constitution clearly says. And in Article 2, let me get there, make sure I don't miss it. All elections shall be free and equal. In Section 2 of Article 2, 5 times precincts are mentioned, including that we must vote in the precinct in election. If we jump on down to Article down to Section 13 in that same Article 2, all elections shall be by the people, by ballot. General elections, they give the time and date for which that should occur. And then if we go down to Article 4 of the Constitution, the General Assembly shall not pass local or special laws regulating county and township business. The last part of the HEA 1633 is requiring us to go to vote centers. That seems a little contradictory to our Constitution. Shall not pass laws regulating the election of county and township officers and their compensation. and shall not provide for the opening and conducting of elections of state, county, township officers, and designating the places of voting. So I think we're going to run into a huge conflict, and it's a very deep concern of mine if we move in this direction. And I think that really needs to be taken into consideration. I do appreciate all the time, and I'm hopeful we can continue the conversation about how we can save some money. I see Allen County is still at a precinct level, but they are showing marked lower cost than many of our, especially our large counties. Maybe it would benefit us to go look at what Allen County is doing and how they're doing that, and maybe some of the rest of us can benefit from what they're doing. I appreciate all of your time and effort. Thank you so much.
Trina?
Hi, Trina Raudabush, Marion County. Just very much want to say thank you for the work that went into this. This was a very insightful presentation. It was very refreshing to have this information presented in a well-researched, fact-based, dispassionate way. I enjoy your enthusiasm, by the way. Again, I appreciate the goal of this to increase voter turnout, increase engagement, lower cost as applicable. I recognize that there are questions and concerns about voter safety and security, and that's likely outside of the scope of your work. So I encourage the legislature to take that into account. But ultimately, presentations like this will go a long way to rebuilding the trust in our elections, hopefully increasing turnout and engagement. And I do hope that the legislature will use this information to make an informed, not an emotional decision as we go forward. So again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Okay, I do have one on here that is not necessarily about the topics here, but I want to see if you do have a question or comment about the two topics that we're discussing. So Nicole, do you have a question or comment about the topics we're discussing? Oh. About vote centers or municipal elections. Okay, moving them to a different year. I just want to make sure.
Well, I don't feel like we have election integrity. First off, my name's Nicole Schuyler Kapuscinski. I'm a combat veteran. I served in Baghdad, Iraq in 2008. And I do not think that we have election integrity in Madison County. So all the stuff that we just talked about doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we don't have election integrity. And I have a question. If all this stuff, what you're doing is good and accurate and true, then who has jurisdiction over the county election boards? Is that on topic?
The county election boards, they are their own entity. So they are the ones who are mainly responsible for the conduction of the elections at the county level.
Which if you put the voting centers or the precincts or any of it in their hands, and there's no one in charge of them when we file complaints, and there's not a real complaint process in Indiana, because obviously I'm standing here and I have lots of papers to prove every fact. I brought my receipts. So anyway, I am pro what's right for the people. I'm pro elections if they have integrity. I think the vote, taking everything into consideration, people working, that was one of the main complaints about the time factors. Shoot, see, this is the only thing I don't like about this stuff. So machines, okay, the voting machines. Can I talk about those? Is that on top
About vote centers or municipal elections, we can talk about it.
Okay, well, all my stuff gets wiped out. So that really sucks. But yeah, so I signed up. Yeah, I never get contacted back.
Okay.
I've been violated by the state of Indiana.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. That is it for us. I just have a few more closing remarks.
I did just want to make one clarifying remark, is that regardless of vote centers or precinct base, all 92 counties do use electronic poll books in Indiana. So I just wanted to let that know that there's not a requirement. There is a requirement for vote center counties to use it, but currently all 92 counties are utilizing electronic poll books. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you guys for your presentation today. Thank you to those in the live stream watching. If you were unable to attend a public meeting but would still like to make a comment, the office will be setting up a designated email to collect comments about these two topics. We will share that email across our social media in the coming days. We must submit our findings of the study and final report to the Legislative Council of the General Assembly by November 1st. We do have, we are planning three more meetings. We have one already set, and we are planning two more, one in Evansville and one in Lake County. So we will have more information out about all of that in the coming days. Thank you all for coming.